Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I interview inspiring, fascinating women who are navigating aging with class and sass. I'm your host, Nicole Christina. Hey everyone, I am so grateful for all of the downloads, and I'd love a rating on iTunes and a comment. And please subscribe. It helps the show's rating so other people can find it and learn how to age well. And if you are loving the podcast, why not check out the companion online course, Zestful Aging, Simple and Sustainable Habits for Health and Longevity. You can access it through my website, NicoleChristina.com/Zestful Aging. It's based on the Harvard study of adult development, and I'm really proud of how it's turned out. Well, I've got my coffee in my hand and my trusty dog Sparky beside me, so let's begin. I am very honored to have a guest on the show today who influenced my career treating women with eating disorders in the mid-90s. Jean Kilbourne is internationally recognized for her groundbreaking work on the image of women in advertising and for her critical studies of alcohol and tobacco advertising. In the late 60s, she began her exploration of the connection between advertising and several public health issues, including violence against women, eating disorders, and addiction, and launched a movement to promote media literacy as a way to prevent these problems. A radical and original idea at the time, this approach is now mainstream and an integral part of most prevention programs. Jean's the creator of the renowned Killing Us Softly, advertising's image of women film series and several other films, and the author of the award-winning book Can't Buy Me Love, How Advertising Changes the Way We Think and Feel, and So Sexy So Soon, the new sexualized childhood and what parents can do to protect their kids. In 2015, she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. I am so happy to introduce Jean Kilbourne today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it was such a pleasure. Thank you, Nicole.
Oh, thank you. Where should we start? Is there a particular place that you'd like to start right now? You know that the podcast is about women sort of roughly 45 and over, and you know that I've treated eating disorders for many years, and I'm seeing, as I'm sure you know, a lot about a resurgence of eating disorders in women of this age. Do you want to start talking a little bit about why that might be?
Sure. I think that originally people thought that, eating disorders or body image troubles afflicted only young women. And especially, years ago, they thought only young white women of, a certain class. And that's never been true, but it's certainly not true now. And it's poor body image and which can often lead to sort of eating disorders or some kind of disordered eating, it seems to me is very prevalent among women of all ages, all ethnic groups, all classes. That it's very difficult to be a woman in America today, and increasingly actually anywhere in the developed world, and not have issues about eating and issues about one's body.
Mm-hmm. That is for sure. And are there particular reasons you think that now, Renfrew, for the listeners who aren't, in this subfield, is I would say it's probably the gold standard for eating disorder treatment. They're reporting a 30 some odd percentage increase in admissions for women over 50. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, a lot of the things that I've been talking about for, I hate to say it, but really for 50 years, because I started collecting ads and talking about the image of women in advertising 50 years ago exactly. And a lot of what I talked about, the tyranny of the ideal image of beauty and the obsession with thinness and the terror that women are made to feel about growing older, a lot of those things are are in many ways worse now than ever before. And I think there are several reasons for that. I mean, one is Photoshop and the way in which images can now be digitally altered to make them absolutely perfect. And not only in ads, but also, women and girls do this themselves when they post things on, Instagram or Facebook or any of the social media sites, and they can use Photoshop to change their own images. So the pressure in some ways to look perfect is greater than it ever has been before. Also because of Photoshop and the ability to alter these images digitally, the models have become thinner and thinner all the time, but they can actually literally be replaced with virtual bodies. So we're more surrounded than ever before with extraordinarily thin models, whether they're real or not, all around us. And there's an increasing emphasis on looking very, very young. And some of this is because of what's done with celebrities, the celebrities who, because of having extraordinary amounts of money and probably in most cases extraordinary amounts of work done, and also able to hire personal trainers and do all kinds of things. So there are celebrities who look much, much younger than they actually are. And yet this is held up to all women as if somehow we could all achieve this if only we tried harder, if we just bought the right products, if we just, exercised enough, all of those kinds of things. So that the standard is more impossible than ever before. And yet at the same time, we are more exhorted than ever before to feel that we somehow should be able to achieve it.
Yeah. And you think that for women, let's say, or empty nesters, for example, women who now are moving into, let's say, post-middle age, and you wouldn't imagine that they would say, wait a minute, this can't be true. Nobody really looks like a Kardashian in real life.
Yeah.
You think that there's a vulnerability, even still with our wisdom, still fall for this.
Absolutely. I think it helps to be aware of the fact that the image is artificially constructed, and it helps to be conscious of it, but I don't think it's possible to not be influenced by it. I mean, I've been studying this, as I said, for 50 years. I'm influenced by it. There's no way not to be. That the pressure on women is so great to look a certain way, to be thin enough, to be young enough, to be perfect looking enough, that even if you know that it's hype and that it's ridiculous and that it isn't, that no one actually really does look like this, I think it's just impossible not to have this be part of our psyche on some level and in some way.
And you speak from experience. If I'm remembering when I saw you at the University of Michigan, am I remembering correctly, you were a model?
I did some modeling when I was very young. I went to Wellesley College back in the days when, after I graduated, I had to go to secretarial school to get a job. So the options for women in those days were extremely limited. So I was a secretary, I was a waitress, and I also had the opportunity to do some modeling. But it was and it was lucrative, and it was one of the very few ways that a woman could make money. And it was seductive in many ways, but it was also quite soul-destroying and quite alienating. I felt extraordinarily objectified, although there wasn't really language in those days to describe that. And there was also a tremendous amount of sexual harassment that came with the territory. So what I would do is I would do a little modeling, I'd make some money, something would happen, I'd go back to being a secretary. I sort of dabbled in it more than anything else. I decided ultimately not to take that path. Not that it would have been really all that available to me, I really don't know. But although I did have one famous designer say to me, baby, I can make you a star, and guess what I would have to do for that to take place. So anyway, so it did, I had enough experience to know that it was not for me, and to know that there was something really profoundly alienating about it. But that was part of what led to my interest in the whole idea of the image of beauty and how extraordinarily important it is for women, and how ultimately I always felt, even as a young woman, that there weren't any winners in this game, that we all were ultimately losers.
Hmm. Do you remember? I mean, I'm just thinking about the women who choose to go to Wellesley, and I'm guessing you were already there's some self-selection there, right? I mean, you were already successful academically. You're pretty thoughtful. I'm guessing. I'm just trying to imagine when you really got hooked into this idea that I need to focus my time and energy on bringing this to light.
Well, that my experience at Wellesley. Yes, I always did well in school, and of course when I went to Wellesley, a lot of the universities, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, a lot of those universities were not open to women. So I went to Wellesley, which it was and remains an all women's college. And for the first time ever, sort of experienced women really in positions of power. At Wellesley, a lot of the faculty, most of the deans, the president were female. Every person who spoke up in class was female by definition. Mm-hmm. So what happened to me, and I think happened to a lot of my classmates, even though I was there before there was any kind of explicit feminist consciousness at Wellesley, or anywhere else for that matter, when I graduated and went out into the real world, I had experienced being first class, and it was very difficult to go back to being second class. So it had left me realizing sort of the cost of discrimination. And then, of course, when I had all those experiences in the job market and all of that had a lot to do with it too. But I didn't set out to have a career like this. It was much more haphazard than that. I just saw a terrible ad one day and thought, this is awful and it's not trivial, and why isn't someone doing something about this? And I just started collecting ads, and I bought a camera and a macro lens and started making slides and put together a slide presentation. And again, not with any real goal in mind, except that I was interested, and it seemed to me that this was important and maybe something that people should be thinking about. And I was also very afraid of public speaking in those days, as most people are. But I was quite passionate. I was very passionate about the topic, and I did feel it was important. So eventually, I spoke more and more. I got over my fear and launched a career as a public speaker. But that was not what I had set out to do.
What was the reaction of your peers and your colleagues it is hard to imagine this not being mainstream, but you were one of the first people to bring this to light.
I was literally the first, I think, because at least I'm not aware of anybody else. And you're right that it's mainstream now, but what I was saying then, and again, this is half a century ago, was absolutely radical. It was radical that to say that advertising had an influence on us. That people thought of advertising as being so trivial that how could it possibly influence us? And even other feminists sometimes said to me, look, we're dealing with serious issues like violence against women. We don't have time for trivia like the image of women in advertising. And I would, of course, respond, they're related, that the objectification of women is part of what creates a climate that encourages violence against women. So it's actually not trivial at all. It's very serious. And of course, these days now we know that, and everybody knows it, but people didn't then.
I remember you showing some slides, and I don't know if you still use these, but they were so shocking. And it was, one of them was this woman, probably under 100 pounds, 6 feet, splayed out on the floor as if she had just been assaulted. And it was an ad for a clothing company.
Yeah, I don't use that particular ad anymore, but there are plenty of ads that show women, first of all, extraordinarily thin women, of course, but also women in risky situations, or women who appear to have been beaten or to have been the victims of some sort of assault. That's still going on in advertising. But even ads that don't do that, even just the ads that objectify women, that turn us into objects, that dismember our bodies, so that just our buttocks or our legs or our breasts are used to sell products, or all kinds of ads feature women that are headless. All you see is the woman from the neck down. This kind of objectification turns women into things, into objects. And whenever you turn a human being into a thing, you're inviting violence. In fact, I think it's really impossible to be violent to someone we consider an equal human being, but it's very easy to abuse a thing. So at the heart of all of this is a kind of dehumanization of women that I think is very much related to all the violence, the abuse, the harassment that women suffer.
And then we put on this additional layer of now the woman is aging. How does that factor into this?
Well, aging for a long time has been really taboo for women, that we're not supposed to show any signs of aging at all. And because the idea has always been that our value, our worth depends on our appearance, our attractiveness, and our ability to attract men. And so it's considered that women are attractive and desirable only if we're very young, or if we stay looking very young somehow, whether that's through Photoshop or surgery or whatever. And that's always been the case. But as I said earlier, it's in many ways worse now because this image can be digitally altered to make women look very different than we actually are. And because of the advancements, or whatever maybe you consider them, that in surgery and Botox and fillers and all kinds of other stuff, so that women with money are able to achieve a look that enables them to look much younger than they are, and that's considered absolutely necessary. The same thing is not true for men. I mean, there's the handsome young man, and then there's the mature, distinguished older man. For women, there's only the beautiful young woman, and older women who still look like the beautiful young woman. So it's a real double standard, and does enormous psychic damage to women, because we get the message that as we grow older, we lose our value. In many ways, we become invisible, and at the same time, as you know, we're wiser than before. We're in many ways more interesting than before, and yet we're told that we're not, that we're invisible, and that we really don't count anymore.
And how does addiction play into all of this?
Well, there's so many different kinds of addiction, but if we're talking about, there's a kind of addiction to beauty products, addiction to shopping, addiction to ways of trying to look young, but more serious, I think, are addictions to alcohol, addictions to other drugs, addiction to tobacco, and
you see that related as women are trying to navigate this impossible standard, and now aging and feeling like, well, unless I have the amount of money that a celebrity does, I can't possibly achieve that. Is there some kind of sense that women become more hopeless or despondent, and then the alcohol comes into play?
Possibly, but I don't think I would lead with that. I think that certainly all of this pressure and the ways in which women are made to feel less valued as we get older can certainly cause depression and low self-esteem and all kinds of other things, and that might be a factor in why women would turn to food or alcohol or other drugs to feel better. But actually, more of a link is the link between violence against women and addiction. That many addicts were sexually abused as children, or experienced violence, sexual assault when they were very young. And there is definitely a link there between the kind of assault and violence that women and girls are exposed to all the time and addiction. And that there's research that sort of backs that up.
Hello, Zestful Agers. First, I want to thank you so much for your enthusiasm and interest in the podcast. Words cannot really describe how fun it is to make this for you. We are now in the tens of thousands of downloads, and Zestful Aging is still very young. We've heard from inspiring women from all over the world, and I hope it has made your life richer and helped you be more zestful as you navigate aging. In addition to being fun, making a weekly podcast is a surprising amount of work. So I want to encourage you to become a patron today. It's the way I can continue bringing you in-depth, thought-provoking interviews without sponsorship, aka commercials. And I've added a special free gift just for being a listener to the podcast. It's called My Best Ever Self-Care Manual. And again, it's based on research and my 25 years experience as a psychotherapist. So hop on over to patreon.com/zestfulaging and download the free manual. And while you're there, donate what you might pay for your cup of coffee today. It will make you feel good. I promise. And so for you now, I mean, you've made such a significant mark on this literature. How have things been for you? Are you still working on these kinds of books and research, or what's life like for you now?
Well, there's so many ways to answer that. It's interesting. It's always been interesting. I'm doing a lot less lecturing than I used to, and that's by choice. When I started out, a long time ago, for many years, I was doing about 110 lectures a year. I was going out on Monday, coming back on Friday. I lectured at over half of all the colleges and universities in the United States and virtually all of them in Canada. And I was just on the road all the time. But I cut back when I had a child. And I had a child quite late in life. My daughter was born when I was 44. So then I did cut back, but I was still doing a lot. But in recent years, past couple of years, I'm doing many fewer lectures, and that's just fine with me. Mm-hmm. I am writing. I don't want to do another research-based book, but I would probably like to do some other kind of book. And I've been writing some articles and essays that are more personal than what I've done in the past. So I recently wrote an article about an experience that I had with being sexually harassed, a long time ago by someone who was quite famous. So that kind of thing I've been doing. And I'm also just trying to, as we all are, slow down a little bit, enjoy life, see my friends, hang out, take care of myself. My daughter got married in June. That was exciting. So I've spent a lot of time planning that. And so all of those kinds of things, life.
Enjoying your life after. What was the thing that you've done career-wise that you're most proud of?
Oh, I don't know. I suppose certainly one of them is that one of them is overcoming my fear of public speaking and getting out there, and speaking. And I always try to tell young women in particular that I had this fear of public speaking because, as I said, most people do, and it's so important that we find our voices and that we use them. So I was very influenced by Eleanor Roosevelt's wonderful line, something like, "You must do the thing you think you cannot do." And so I just did it, and it got so it wasn't so difficult anymore. So I guess I'm proud of that. I'm also very glad that I made Killing Us Softly. When I did the first version of Killing Us Softly, I made in 1979, and I've remade it 3 times since then, and it's very widely used, all around the world, and I hear from people all the time that it's made a real difference in their lives, and I'm very happy about that.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I saw it, being somebody who studies this, who's in this world, who was trained in treating eating disorders. And I think I felt like I read every single book on this kind of thing. I remember being struck by learning things and saying this goes another level deeper than what I've thought about or what I've read. I just found it to be so perceptive isn't even the right word, but so deeply thought out, and it surprised me how much new material was there for me to kind of work through in my own brain, even after immersing I went to Smith College School for Social Work, so it was a similar experience for me, that I was with a lot of powerful, strong women. It was very important in my development, but that's what I remember in watching your film. And I think I saw the original, that wow, we're in new ground now. This is, and I think as I'm remembering it, I hadn't seen or thought about the dismemberment. We all now know about objectification and all this, but you showing pictures of, here's a leg, here's a head. I mean, what is this? Is like taking apart a Barbie doll.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm glad that it did have that effect. And certainly, I mean, when I look back, and especially when I look at the first version, I mean, the first version was incredibly simply and cheaply made. It was literally one camera, one angle, trained on me, giving a lecture. Cost something like $6,000 to make. There was no marketing for it at all. And yet, in today's language, it went viral. And I think it was because there wasn't anything else like it out there. And I think another reason is that I use a lot of humor in it, and I always have. And those were back in the days when people were saying feminists had no sense of humor. So I think that when people were going to look at a film on the image of women in advertising, they expected to be hectored, or to be, I don't know what. But in any event, it's actually pretty hilarious, because the ads are so completely ridiculous. And I've always encouraged people to laugh at the ads. So
I do remember your humor in it. Who are your feminist heroines?
Well, I mean, the first person who comes to mind is Jean Baker Miller.
My goodness.
Yeah, who wrote Toward a New Psychology of Women. And she, that was a book that was published, I think, in 1976, which was a very important year for me. But and she became a friend, a mentor. She was an absolutely wonderful woman. And Toward a New Psychology of Women, I think, is a really groundbreaking, extraordinarily important book. So that's one, certainly one person who comes to mind. So there are others who are probably not so famous, but just, women who've influenced me in one way or another, and or been supportive, or been helpful. So I'm influenced a lot by my daughter, who's very smart. She's a social worker, by the way, and a clinical social worker, and she's and a writer. She's a wonderful writer, and she's very smart and intuitive, and I feel like having her has given me some real appreciation for the much maligned millennials.
How was it for you raising a girl? Were you concerned that she would sort of fall prey to some of these messages, as you say, are absolutely inescapable?
Very much so, and of course, I mean, she did. I mean, as I said, there's really no way to completely avoid this. And there couldn't be a better educated child on this topic than my daughter. And she was a very happy, very confident little girl. But when she hit adolescence, I mean, she hit, in some ways, the same kind of wall that most girls hit. The sort of the drop in self-esteem, and the worries about one's body and all of that. I mean, she escaped some of the worst kinds of things that happened, but I certainly can't say that I had made her, bulletproof in some way. There isn't any. That's why I talk about what I call a toxic cultural environment, and how important it is to see all these issues as public health issues, and that we have to work on changing the environment, because we can't save our children, child by child, house by house. We really need to try to create a culture that's healthier and safer for all children.
Yes. I mean, I hear this from other women who are very clear with their children from age one, their girls particularly, and it's, you are fighting a tidal wave. It's impossible to inoculate them. Yeah.
I felt that I was raising my daughter in a culture that was hostile to everything I wanted for her, and that I had to fight the popular cultural messages about sex and alcohol and, and beauty and all of it, every step of the way. And it was exhausting. And it's really not possible to do it, all by oneself, just for one's child. I mean, nor should we. We should be working to make the world safer and better for all children.
Do you have any advice for women? I'm seeing this in my practice where the kid, things are really starting to change for them. They're sending their child off to college, perhaps. Maybe they're reassessing their relationships. They might be starting to think about retirement. And as we know, a very simple solution is to start restricting the food you eat and the dieting, helping you feel safer and more controlled, and and all of this stuff. It's very tempting. Do you have advice for women who are a bit at a loss? What's next for me? What now? I'm wrinkling. I'm not the men or women are not looking at me in the same way they used to. I don't know what to do with this loss of my identity.
The thing that's been most helpful to me my whole life in every step of the way has been my friendships with other women. So that the one thing to do is, of course, is to reach out to other women and just talk about these experiences and share them. And because, I try to have friends of different ages, but I do have a lot of friends my own age, so we can talk about the psychic pain that all this causes, but we can also joke about it and use a lot of humor to make that helps, I think. But mostly it helps to know you're not alone and to have and to have supportive relationships and friendships that can help, and there is kind of an upside to not being a sex object anymore. Gloria Steinem, I think, said one of the many sort of smart things she has said was something like, when she stopped thinking about sex, it freed up all kinds of brain cells, for other things. And I think that that's true, and that there's also a certain kind of, even though the invisibility can be painful and it can be kind of disturbing, there's also a way in which there's a kind of safety that comes with it and a kind of ability to sort of move through the world more freely than I was able to do, let's say, when I was a, beautiful young woman.
Mm-hmm. I interviewed a woman who had been a former Vogue model. Her name is Jill Dodd, and now she's in her 50s, and we were talking about her experience. She has a book out, and I said, what's it like, to have been recognized all your life, and people, it's all about your beauty and being pursued. And she said, it is such a relief. Mm-hmm. Not to have to deal with that anymore. She just she talked about just being so free.
I think that's true. And it's also true that if you are, when you're a young woman and if you are considered beautiful, you do get an enormous amount of attention, and it can feel like power. And I suppose it is power in a way, but it's very short-lived. And the thing I always knew, even when I was very young, was that this was not going to last very long, and that if my value depended on this, I was going to be in big trouble as I got older. So I did try. That's one of the reasons that led me to, start looking at these images, because I just knew that I was getting a whole lot of attention, but it really didn't have anything to do with me, and it wasn't going to last. So there is some relief. I can't say there. Of course, there's also a sense of loss, and also as one gets, much older, then there's the sense of having not so much time left, and still a whole lot that one wants to do.
Mm-hmm. Are you feeling that in your own life, that, there's more time behind you than there is in front of you, and some urgency?
Absolutely. Well, there's a whole lot more time behind me than there is in front of me. And yes, I do feel that. And I feel it in terms of what I'd like to do. And, there are still other things I'd like to write and all of that. But I also feel it on a more personal level. My daughter, as I said, just got married, and she's married. That she made a wonderful choice, and I'm so thrilled about that. And they do want children, and I, of course, would love to be around to be with them. So, I'm feeling that as well. I'm still, who knows? None of us knows how much time we have left, but I'm certainly hoping to be around long enough to be part of my grandchildren's lives.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can imagine. Any last words you'd like to say to our listeners who, maybe struggling with this, this whole idea of the what now and who am I now? Any last words?
Well, I think these days there are quite a lot of resources, there's some wonderful books out there. There's also great films. I have an extensive resource list on my website, which is just jeankilbourne.com, and people can find, one of the things I say on my website is sort of my mantra is action is the antidote to despair. So if you're feeling that, lost or at sea or something like that, that maybe it would be good to get active in some other way. I mean, these days I urge people to get politically active and to, urge people to get out the vote and to, get people registered and to, and to try and do, help some of the people who are being overlooked and trampled these days. So that's one thing. Or there's many other kinds of projects, volunteer projects and I just find that if you're taking some kind of action, that helps enormously in terms of feeling. It helps you to feel a whole lot less hopeless.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really good advice because I think people are feeling hopeless now for a number of different reasons, not only because of the whole aging and ageist problem.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
No.
That's really
Yeah.
helpful. Action is the antidote to despair. And people can find you at jeankilbourne.com.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it has been such an honor to speak with you today, Jean. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom.
Thank you, Nicole. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. I love to hear from my listeners, so send me an email at NicoleChristina.com and tell me what you'd like to hear more about. I would also greatly appreciate if you could hop on iTunes and rate the show. Ratings help other people find the podcast so I can share all these good, juicy interviews with others. I would also invite you to become a patron of the Zestful Aging podcast. Hop on over to patreon.com/Zestful Aging and consider making a small donation. You will be eligible for insider-only goodies and behind-the-scenes information, and it'll help you feel good knowing that you're contributing to the Zestful Aging podcast. I'll look forward to sharing more juicy interviews next week on Zestful Aging.